Good morning. Welcome to a warm morning, and I hope we are able to keep you feeling that it's worthwhile to have come this morning to this lovely, salubrious place, which I have an emotional attachment to because 35 years ago I came here when my children were all studying, and in fact, the place we are sitting has been, my son will hate me for saying this, but donated by my son, who was along with his batchmates, to be fair, but they are very excited that I'm here and they want a lot of photographs taken so that they can relive their childhood. And so if you see a lot of photographers, it's not because I'm about to replace Mr. Modi, but only because my children have sent me a message saying how exciting, take all the photos. Unni, you and I are here together.
Yeah.
You'll never find two Krishnans of different varieties sitting together. All you need is a Shivarama Krishnan to join us, and then you'll have a proper panel. Now, what we want to talk about this morning is long living institutions. How do you create long living institutions? And I use the word institution personally in a broader sense than just a company. But obviously, my focus is on companies, and I think yours also. That's because of our background. And I feel a bit incompetent to extend it to parliament and, judiciary and so on. Or schools. I mean, this school, where we are sitting, was started in 1857-58. 10 years before Tata Sons was set up. So it has lasted 166 years. Huh? So there are many, many institutions, temples and so on, but we will keep our focus to companies. And I think the first question we would like to explore, Unni, you've done a research on long living institutions. Why is it important? Why should you spend Sunday morning at 9:30 thinking about long living institutions instead of sitting in the sun and having a cup of coffee? Unni.
Thank you, Aji. Thanks. Long living, before going into long living institutions, firstly, in this beautiful, pristine environment, one can expect lots of noble thoughts to enter our mind, and may that be the case with this first session. Long living institutions are maybe representative of the unheard cry of modern business. We have a tremendous problem of corporate mortality, which is rising fast, especially in the Western world, where a number of companies, which all of you might have studied in your management tomes and textbooks, have extinguished themselves, destroyed themselves, none greater than maybe GE, which lies in the graveyard.
And Boeing.
And Boeing following.
Not yet in the graveyard.
Not yet there, but going there. HP, I don't need to talk about. Kodak, I don't need to talk about. I can talk for the next 10 minutes of names which you would be familiar with who have decided to self-destruct themselves. So one is the loss of corporate mortality, loss through corporate mortality, and the other, which I'm sure you're catching through news media, which is the tremendous amount of burnout, mental stress, a loss of well-being of people, especially in the States, where mental illness has soared by 50 to 60%. Is there a connection between burnout of the individual and burnout of the collective? Is a question one ought to ponder.
That's a good way to look at the problem. Many people look at institutions as inanimate. We will use the word it if you're talking in English. But my experience, and I suspect if you ask yourself this question, your experience, is that institutions are live. It's people who make the institution. Whether it's a company, or a temple, or a school. It's the organic interactions in that institution. Now, you take any other live institution, like your own society. If somebody has a baby in their house, we visit that family, and if you're an elder, you'll say, Dirghayusha Bhava. I don't know whether caste or religion or any other color of skin is produces a different reaction. When you have a startup, why should you not say Dirghayush Bhava? Startups think that they are a new entity and therefore they do whatever they feel like, and many of them self-destruct. Likewise, old companies self-destruct. So I think thinking of institutions as a living machine immediately brings into your mind, without getting long lectures at Nilgiri Economic Dialogue, that the way we look at it depends on how we deal with it. And that institutions are living machines. You know, do you have any experience of measuring living machines?
Several. I think the journey started at the Tata Group 18 or 19 years ago, when we met with your former colleague, God bless his soul, Mr. Krishna Kumar, who had asked me, does the Taj have a living soul? Can it speak to its leadership? Can it be its conscience keeper? Can it provide a direction for the institutional long-term value of the Taj? So these questions are prevalent in enlightened institutions, whether it's a Godrej or a Mahindra or a Bajaj. These conversations are happening with owners. The question is whether we have a model or some sort of a framework with which one can study it. Hence, we created whatever you referred as the living machine. I think you said something very important, but I don't know whether people picked up, which is the way one disposes attention is what you get back from the world. So if you see the company merely as a machine, it will act back as a machine. But if you infuse it with the living, you will see those vital qualities reflecting backwards to you. The question is, how do you want to dispose your attention? In a mere mechanistic way, or by infusing life into it, or life force into it?
This is a very good point at which I would like to share an experience. As I think some of you know, I spent the last 18 years of my career in Tata's, and one of the companies that Tata's made a bid for in Tata Chemicals, of which I was the vice chairman, is a company in UK called Brunamont. Brunamont is a very old company making a particular type of product, sodium carbonate, soda ash, whatever you want to call it. Now, when I went to Brunamont, after the acquisition was done, the senior leadership sat in the room and they said, "What do you want us to do?" So I said, "I don't understand your question." They said, "Well, you all have bought us over. Now give us your instructions as to what is to be done." This is the machine metaphor. The machine sits in the morning waiting for the operator to come and press the buttons to tell it what to do. So my response was not very original. It's not my own thought. It's obviously borrowed from Ratan Tata's inspiration. I said, "You know why we have bought you? Not to tell you what to do, but to know what you do that you lasted 100 years so that we can learn from it." We also have a soda ash factory in Tata Chemicals in a place called Meetapur. And conversely, you can learn what we do, and together we'll be better than what we started with. This is sorry, you don't mind, this is a bit crazy. We've always been told that when a takeover happens, the conqueror tells the new subjects what is to be done. I said, but that's precisely different from the Indian way. I can't talk of Indian way, I'm not a scholar, but certainly the Tata way. We don't come and take over like Genghis Khan taking over a new territory. We have come to see like a marriage. The husband and the wife both bring something to the party, and together they have to figure out, and it's very complicated, it's easy to say it on a seminar on Sunday morning, for them to figure out how they can together do something better than what they would have done individually. And take my word for it, after 55 years of happy matrimony, it's a complex exercise. But it's an exercise that you have to undertake if you want the marriage to last and the fruits of the marriage to survive and prosper. And so it is with companies. So I think the point that you make, that it's not a question of coming and treating it and talking to it like a machine, but as another human being, is a very, very correct point that matches with my experience.
Yeah, also the Tata's acquisition of JLR is a wonderful example of it. Ford, which ran the company earlier, treated it like a machine. And we know what became of JLR under Ford's supervision.
In fact, you know what happened to Ford itself.
It accumulated a bombastic $13 billion of losses over a 10 or 12 year period. When the Tatas came in, I think the approach which RG mentioned was applied. But it took a long time. The Indian press went to town and the global press went to town saying this is all going nowhere, it's not going to work and all that. So persistence and patience in nurturing the living is an extremely defining quality, which usually people don't want to pursue for whatever reason. But one other thing, RG, just to step on one other side, which is from a financial perspective, generally, I heard many people talk about it yesterday in the panel, you were not there, saying that shareholder value is the only way to look at it. This is utterly false. In finance is a very large proportion of value called perpetuity. So if the living, that which is living is that which is perpetual. A dead, inanimate object cannot be perpetual. So if you treat your company like a lifeless, soulless machine, thou shalt get no perpetuity, which anybody in finance knows is a very vast amount of enterprise value, accounting more than 70 to 80% of the value of the business. So it is in enlightened interest of the owners to look at perpetuity, look at the fact that things can happen over a long period of time and compounding builds over that period. I think there are several other people who are bringing this to the fore. You know him, that guy, I forget his name, Marcellus chap. He's also measuring compounding.
So this is, you see this, there's a big debate going on in business management circles, but you can apply this to Kanchipuram temple or to the school. Is a family managed ownership or a dispersed ownership by, anonymous shareholders good? And there are pluses and minuses, each one can talk to it. But the generalization should not be on family managed, because families tend to think of their business as something they should leave for their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. TV Sundaram Iyengar may not exist as a company, but that spirit exists in 50 entities or 20 entities. They may be run by 5 different people. Tata's was started in 1868. I don't know how many companies we have. We are not fond of family planning, but we have at least, when I joined the company, Ratan Tata told me we have 100 companies, you must help to reduce it to 30 or 40. But I'm told the irrepressible Indian male instinct has taken over, and there are over 1,000 companies now. So I retired at a good old age, saying, I better not try to supervise family planning here. So, what is the real instinct? Perpetuity. We credit family businesses because we say somebody in the family, not all family members, by the way, there are some who sort of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves characters in families. But likewise in professional companies, not all CEOs are interested in just saying during my tenure I did this, so much increase percentage. If you have a perpetuity mindset, it doesn't matter whether you're from the family or a professional, you implement professional perpetuity things. And perpetuity, he'll explain a little bit more how he measures it. If you calculate the market cap of a company, you can say that due to the cash flows, future cash flows, as projected by the management, its value is X. But there is another part, which is called perpetuity value, which is what is the really long term? Is there intellectual property? Are you doing R&D? Have you got a special way to nurture managers? How does Hindustan Lever manage to produce 3 candidates for every time there's a CEO vacancy? And so on and so forth. And they have a way to measure it, which if you're interested, Unni can explain and we can engage in. But I want to tell you philosophically, at my age I'm allowed to be a bit philosophical. Who are you running the enterprise for? Why is Tata being run? Why is TVS being run? Why is Bajaj being run? Why is Godrej being run? Is it to make profit? Yesterday somebody said this, you run a company to make profit. That's as valid and insightful as saying, why are you living? And you say, I'm breathing because I want to live. But you don't breathe because you want to live. You breathe so that you have life, so that you can do something else, become an artist, become a musician. In the same way, you make profit in order to do something else. Making profit is not an end in itself. Making more or less profit is not a big deal in itself. So this whole capitalistic model of trying to increase market cap, increase dividend flow, being the best in total shareholder return is a bit dumb. I can say this after 50 years of corporate experience. And it's being overdone. Up to a point, it's fine. It is just like if you're raising a child. It's not just to come get the gold medal in this school and then in that college and in that university and get a PhD. It is to do more than that. And what is that more? Okay? I want to tell you a story. I'm a bit fond of stories, so I hope you don't mind. It also helps on Sunday morning not to get too deep into. In 1893, Swami Vivekananda went to Chicago. All of us know this, Parliament of Religions. And he became very well known and famous. And Emma Calvé was the top, she was the sort of the top opera singer of those days. She became his disciple. And Emma Calvé knew John D. Rockefeller. And she went to John D. Rockefeller one day and said, you know, John, this Swamiji from India in saffron robes is saying wonderful things. You should come and meet him. Now, John D. Rockefeller was the world's richest man or something like that at that time. And he said, okay. And he came and they had a conversation. And she's written all this in French in her diary, which I've got from the archives of Vivekananda archives. And he asked Rockefeller, I won't go into the drama around it, but it's quite dramatic. She said, I believe you're the wealthiest man in America. He said, so they say. How much wealthier are you than the average American? He said, I don't know, maybe 100 times. So Swamiji asked him, do you think you're 100 times smarter than the average American? He said, I must be, otherwise I wouldn't be having this money. He said, has it ever occurred to you that you're a conduit for this money to go to somebody else? Of course, John D. Rockefeller, who's used to entering a room and everybody standing up, there are other people of that variety existing even today, got up and walked away. He said, this guy is crazy. But 12 years later, I won't tell you what all happened in between, 12 years later, he said the old man had an idea, the young man had an idea. And he gave away all his wealth to the Rockefeller Foundation. In 1912, I remember the year because my father was born in that year, he willed all his money to the Rockefeller Foundation. So, when we say that there's a larger purpose to business, contrast that with Sam Altman of artificial intelligence fame. You set up a company knowing that it could be dangerous to mankind. It's a not-for-profit company. You run it, you get your R&D and you start finding a way to commercialization. You promptly change the name of the company. No, not the name, the mandate of the company. Imagine if today Sundaram Foundation or Godrej Foundation or Tata Trust says we are now in it for profit. You know, it doesn't make sense. So I think this point about purpose, why are you doing it? India will become a Vishwaguru when we have corporate India as Vishwabandhus. Corporate India is not a Vishwabandhu today. I'm not here to preach. There are lovely examples in our country, but we need a hell of a lot more. And I'll close before you speak with just giving you some numbers. It is absolutely staggering, at least for me. Under the MSME ministry, they have these statistics. India has how many enterprises? 63 million. 63 million enterprises. An enterprise is defined by them as anybody who's running a vyavasai, a business. So lawyer's firm, accountant's firm, everything is included. Of the 63 million, how many have a capital of more than 10 crores? 19,000. I have not missed my zeros, 19,000. It might have become 20,000 by now. Of the 19,000, how many are listed? Listing is like saying he's passed BSc exam. He's a graduate. He's accountable to somebody. 4,000. Of the 4,000 which are listed, how many account for 70% of the market cap? 100. So our corporate India, and in fact, I'm happy this is a CII sponsored forum. Corporate India is a few giants with a lot of pygmies. And the giants may be good or bad. There are pygmies also who are great. I call them small giants. Giants in thought, but not in turnover. We need a hell of a lot more of them. That's my main point about people with a purpose.
Just dialing back on a couple of things which you mentioned earlier. One really important point which you sort of bypassed very quickly, you call shareholder value a dumbest idea. But let's just look at GE. GE achieved quarterly earnings to the cent for more than 185 quarters continuously. But obviously this has not been very good for the company. So maximizing profit on a quarterly basis can be really bad for you, is the example that GE gives us. The other part which many people might be not aware is the Western world is increasingly giving away or letting go the ideas of quarterly earnings and putting it away, while we in India are busy trying to copy it. I think there was a talk yesterday in the evening, I think an elderly gentleman, I think Arun Maira, mentioned the point about some aspect of agriculture. He mentioned, should we be copying the cropping approaches that we should be giving away at this point? Similar is the question, should we be copying and emulating zombie ideas which the Western world is getting rid of, while we are busy trying to make sure that we are adhering to that? These are very important questions which need a deeper look. And in the Drucker Forum, where we are a partner, we have created a movement called Next Management, where we are trying to script these new ideas so that organizations, leaders can look at it and see whether these newer ideas, fresher ideas, can give an alternative perspective rather than being beholden to zombie ideas, which have really run their course.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. Because, it is not that Indian ideas are better or Eastern ideas are better. We are not damning Western ideas. So this is not an exceptionalism debate. It is a more inclusive debate. And I think the heart of everything that CII and NED are trying to do is in that same zone. There are terrific Western ideas. For example, you must be efficient. And there are very many ways of efficiency. There are hundreds of books. And all of us who've done management courses know that it's a focus on efficiency, productivity, efficiency. But an Eastern way of looking at it, I mean Indian, but I'll keep it more broad by saying Eastern, is are you effective? All efficiencies are not necessarily effective. If your wife tells you something and very efficiently you say you're talking rubbish, it is not going to be very effective. If you don't know this, those who are young, try it after you're married. Those who are married, please remember that you're doing the right thing. It is not that I use the word husband and wife not to be gender. It could be the other way around, the husband also. So there's a huge difference between efficiency and effectiveness. And what Western pedagogy on business and enterprise is about efficiency. If it's a machine, you keep on pushing it for efficiency, there comes a time it will break. To make it, here we got an expert here, Mr. Ramakrishnan, on operations, and at some stage you got to pull it apart, redesign some parts, and treat it as an effective thing, and then you might increase its capacity further. That's why the importance of the Eastern idea of the living machine is so important. And I do believe, personally, that it can be a terrific outcome of NED, CII, Drucker Forum, I don't know who else. We are not the only votaries of this. To take this living machine idea, this long living metaphor, and helping India over the next 30 years, many of us won't be around, to create long living, healthy institutions. And there are examples. My own experience during my career has been in Hindustan Lever, which is now finishing, coming up to 100 years. Tata's, which is 156 years. We are sitting in a school, which is 157 years. And there are wonderful examples, some chronicled, some less so.
Can I add something?
Please.
If you look at Japan, there are more than 1,000 companies which are more than 1,000 years old. 1,000 years old, I'm not joking. 1,000-year-old companies continue to thrive, flourish, produce great economic value, and serve society at the same time with no problems. So, number one. If you look at Europe, you can see Mittelstand companies in the German area, they are usually 100 or 200 years old.
Yeah, Buller, for example. It's
Exactly.
a fantastic company.
Or you take a special class of European companies, they are called the Henokens. They are 300-year-old companies. So every year we are bringing these companies to the Drucker Forum so that they can share the lessons of longevity and we can understand what lessons we can draw from them. And I'm sure India can bring her own lessons to the party, and that becomes a bigger and a larger understanding as to what drives the living element and how these companies are serving society and producing perpetual value. And if you look at the countries, it is not by accident those countries are well-to-do countries with a good social fabric. Okay, Germany undergoing some challenges now. We'll take it out for the moment. But if you look at history, reasonably good social well-being. If you look at France and other areas where these companies exist, again, the same case. And of course, Japan. I don't need to talk about Japan too much. I'm sure all of you know about it. So it's not just about profitability. It's also about how they are serving society and how everybody is benefiting in that process. And without that, RG, I think I'm fully backing your argument. There's no way in hell we're going to go to 2047 and say that we have become a very advanced country in any way. Maybe by GDP size, we might get there. But I'm not so sure whether the social fabric and the way that the gap between various levels of society are going to go down. So we imagine companies as golden gooses. I'm sure you heard the little fable, Aesop's fable of the golden goose. So if you love the goose, take care of the goose, feed it well, it continues to produce a lasting supply of golden eggs. And therefore, long-living institutions are golden gooses of society.
I will slightly differ from you, because if you agree on everything, what's use of having a panel discussion? I'm inspired by the Eastern idea of rebirth. I'm not here to propagate the idea of rebirth, especially to a crowd like this. In the West, I need to talk about it. There is no golden goose. These companies have an Atma, and they have a body. The body dies, the Atma lives. You have to think of the whole thing very differently than the way we think of golden goose and eggs. So, Jamsetji Tata, I've written a book recently, so I'm full of Jamsetji Tata, so I hope you'll forgive me. His Atma is living. I would like to believe Godrej's life, his Atma is living in Godrej. Mr. T.V. Sundaramayanga's Atma is living somewhere in that. Atma is not something you can catch. I have worked for, amongst many, many brands, 3 brands. Cheeseborough Ponds was not a brand or an intellectual property or a perpetual value created by Unilever. At some stage, due to various reasons, the company Cheeseborough Ponds Incorporated came up for takeover. Unilever bought it, and the Atma of Cheeseborough Ponds is now living in Unilever. It's a different body, but Cheeseborough Ponds, the Ponds infatuation is absolutely, if you go to the Ponds guys, and Ponds is a Chennai-based company, those of you who live in Chennai know that. I'll give you another example, Castrol. Until recently, I was the chairman of Castrol. It's a lubricants company. It was started by a guy who found during the Crimean War that when you soldiers get cuts, remember this is the days before anesthesia and so on, applying a little bit of grease. That's how Cheeseborough Ponds started. And then Castrol started. Then Castrol went on, and finally British Petroleum took over Castrol. Castrol is now a 100 and something years brand. It's a powerful, solid, terrific brand. So it is important to understand that just by changing the name, you don't give it eternity. If Zomato becomes Tomato, or what is it called now? Eternal. I wish it well. I am sure it will be hopefully long lasting. I'm sorry? So I wish Zomato good luck, but we need many more people who will actually make eternal happen. And eternal requires you to think about what it is that is eternal. And I'm commenting to you certain Eastern ideas which Westerners find very difficult to comprehend. Rebirth, for example. They say, I don't know what you're talking about. But living for somebody else, not having too much. You know, I was at an MBA school and people said, why do you say it's possible to have too much profit? You know, somebody's company is worth $1.6 trillion. I can do the maths. It's an enormous sum of money. It's almost half the GDP of India. Okay? And I think that's fine. But can you have too much profit? Yes, you can. You require oxygen to survive. How do you get your oxygen? You breathe air. How much oxygen does air have? 18 or 20%. I'll give you pure oxygen in a cylinder. You'll be dead. You'll be dead in 1 year flat. This is what happens to companies. Too much profit destroys. That's why in Tata's, we always said, I want you to be at the upper end, but not necessarily the top end. Because that becomes a negative end by itself, as you were saying. So if you follow some of these practices, there is experience to suggest that your perpetual value can become a very good marker of longevity. You know, you don't have to go to an astrologer anymore. In the line, inga so you'll be living for 100 years. So you got an astrologer here called Unni Krishnan. How does this perpetual value and percentage work? Can you tell them?
Generally, what we have learned over 18, 19 years. By the way, it's all summarized in this booklet, which is hopefully on your table. A lot of effort has gone behind it. What we have done is we have looked for what are the markers of the living in organizations. It's all detailed in the report. You can study it. And what kind of perpetual value is accrued to the company. So generally for a healthy company, 70 to 80% of value is in the perpetual zone. But companies do not measure it, companies do not test it, companies do not even look at it actually. But over a period of time, when things start to go down, people start to look at it, say something is wrong, something is not working, etc. So we would encourage some kind of a litmus test or some kind of a stress test to see whether the living is in a good shape and how much of perpetuity is being accrued. All the details are there in the booklet. We can, anybody interested can have a conversation. Nothing, it's not rocket science. There is no black box, there's nothing. It's a simple, straightforward idea. I do not know why modern management has ever gone in that direction. A bit like what RG is saying. Our Eastern values and wisdom does point to these things. We have perhaps taken our eye off it a little bit. Lastly, RG, I just wanted to mention the India Way runs every year at the Drucker Forum. We have started it last year. We would encourage enlightened companies to pursue or talk or develop the India Way and the living machine model. If you're interested, we would be happy to welcome you on board. We have a collection of companies who are pursuing this direction. And I think what Richard Straub, who is the chairman of the Drucker Forum, told me is deeply entrenched in my mind. 2 years back, he said, Unni, the Western world does not have much to offer. These were striking words for me. We do not have any great ideas to offer. So would some people from India come forward and start sharing some of their perspectives? Maybe it is our time to step forth and say our piece to the world. Thank you.
You know, human beings are always fascinated with longevity, what makes you live long, Ayurveda, all these things have come out of that quest, which is, thousands of years old. I was in Jaipur last week, the Jaipur Lit Fest, and one of the speakers was Venki Ramakrishnan, who's won the Nobel Prize. And he's a molecular biologist. And I was in two minds. I mean, he's a Nobel Prize winner, I'd like to hear him. But what could a molecular biologist say which is not mumbo jumbo? But out of curiosity, I went. Here's a compatriot who's won the Nobel Prize. It's a big deal. And I must say, Venki, if you ever get a chance to listen to him in one of the other Lit Fests, do that. His book is more dense than when he speaks, which is probably something somebody told him after he finished writing the book and winning the Nobel Prize. But he asked the question, why do we die? That's the name of his book. Why do we die? And I applied the same thing after listening to him to companies. Why do we die? We don't die because one particular organ has failed. We say heart attack, we say liver, but that's a manner of speaking. He says the total system starts collapsing. Maybe one starts the process and then the others follow. So there's a total systems collapse. And exactly the same thing happens in companies. You may not be customer centric. You may not be productive in your factories. You're not following TPM, TQM, whatever is required to be efficient. You're not benchmarking against your competitors. That weakness begins to grow. It spreads to other parts of the company and there's a total system collapse. It's exactly like the human body. Point number 2. He said human beings die because we must promote good habits. Everybody knows what the good habits are. Take deep breaths, have exercise, walk around. I mean, you don't need a book on that, but if I was a Nobel Prize winner, I would write a book on it. Promote good habits. Listen to your grandfather, he'll tell you. But the second thing he says, avoid bad habits. So if you promote good habits and avoid bad habits, you're quite a distance. Then, at some stage, human beings can't live forever. Companies also can't live forever. Somebody may be 1,000 years, but its shape and size has changed. It has got reborn as a new avatar. And the third lesson that I learned from Venki, all of this adds to my common sense. That's why I've retained it and I'm transmitting it. Trying to do things artificially doesn't help. There's a limit to growth. So trying to become 7 feet tall when your son is 10 years old by sending him to the gymnasium doesn't help. Message for startups. Why should you want to be a $4 billion company in your 5th year and acquire the acronym? What are they called? Decacorn, unicorn, something, all sorts of corny stuff, It's nuts. It is nuts. The principle of obliquity applies to life, human life, as well as to corporations. What is the principle of obliquity? If you set out to do something, you won't get there. If Tendulkar or Gavaskar or Virat Kohli stands there saying, I must get my 100 this time, 99 he'll go. It is when he says, I must do the best I can for this stroke. That's what the sportsmen say. In my small way, I also play sports at my limited level, club level, and I found exactly the same. It is 6-5, set point, my favor, and I say, I must buddy slam, and then it goes somewhere else. All golfers know that you drive for show, but you putt for dough. You don't have to play golf to know this. So it is the ability to focus your entire life around that 1 minute when you're hitting the ball that makes a difference. And it's exactly the same with the principle of obliquity. And so I think when you set out to say, I'll become a $5 billion company, you won't get there. If you say, what else do I have to do to become a better company? And you arrive at that through internal dialogue, benchmarking, and so on and so forth. Those are very well known. Then you start to get it. I remember, I don't know, how are you doing for time? When are we supposed to shut up? As you know, it's not easy to shut us up, but if you tell us the time, at least we'll open it up for a discussion. Who's in charge of the time? Well, half an hour more, but we won't talk for half an hour. Because, Krishnan, open brackets, Gopal plus Unni, close bracket is an infinite number. So, we will shut up in five minutes and then we'll open it up for a discussion. Sorry? 10. So what was I saying just before I've forgotten now. What I was saying just before unicorns and decacorns, that you cannot set out. I find many companies, right, we want to be a $5 billion company. What are you going to do to get to be a $5 billion company? We want to be Viksit Bharat. As my Bengali friend uncontrollably says, we want to be big shit Bharat. And I've had great difficulty explaining to my Bengali friend, it is not big shit. It is Viksit. But he can't tell the difference between the two anyway. So, you want to be Viksit Bharat? That's good. But what are you going to do about it? And all the things that have been discussed yesterday will come to the fore to tell you what is to be done. So, I am a great believer in the principle of obliquity. When the child is born in the family, you don't say that child is going to be a Nobel Prize winner or is going to get Bharat Ratna and Bharatanatyam. You say, I will do whatever is required to enable that child to become whatever. So when you play snooker, billiards, you have the principle of obliquity. I'm a very powerful believer that life itself is about obliquity. And so when you have a startup, Akila, I hope you're listening. When you have a startup, please tell them, Maenge bada go. Because you can get seduced by your own dreams. Dreams are important, but the means to the dreams are more important. So I just wanted to mention that this point about long life and is very, very valid. It is a bit Eastern. When we explain this at Drucker Forum, I was also there last year in Vienna. Either they are polite and they say, yeah, you have a point, and then they forget about it. Or they say, that's very interesting, can I know more about it? But very few said, fantastic. But I think India can take the lead in this in some way, without having exceptionalism, without saying we are the greatest, we are 5,000 years old, believe us, this is true. That's not the purpose and the way in which I want to go. Corporate India has a role to play. And let's face it, from the time of Aristotle, from the time of our own saints in the past, we've said, you have to read Ponniyin Selvan, you have to read the Chola Empire, to know that without business, none of that would have happened. Business is the engine that provides the resources for governments to work. There's no civilization which has been without business. So business being healthy it's like saying your heart must be very strong if you want the body to work. How can you have poetry, literature, sculpture, temples, if you don't have a good heart and a good lung? And the heart and the lung of any society is business. And I'm sometimes worried that the lit fests are getting a bit carried away with this, that, and this. Yeah, by all means, those have a role. But where is the oxygen coming from? It's coming from good, honest, sustainable, enlightened enterprise. And I think it's important to be able to discuss this. Have you got anything to add, or shall we open it up for any questions or comments?
Just one last sentence, because you went long about the characteristics of the living. I think the nonlinear nature of the living and the way it flows is something which is very difficult to understand if you run the company, as he initially said, from the attention disposition of a machine, because everything in a machine is linear. So I think it's an extremely valid point that the life force of organizations follow nonlinear patterns. And understanding those nonlinear patterns and systemic views is far superior than merely trying to tinker the machine and try to get some linear results, which usually don't last. So last sentence as a food for thought, would you prefer to live in a world where the living drives the machine, or would you prefer the machine driving the living? That's a question to wonder.
And if there are any management institute people here, ask yourself whether the pedagogy you're teaching is all HBS cases and water. Nothing against them. I've also been the beneficiary. But are there any cases that you have which makes the people understand that this is a living machine? See, in my experience, there are 4 kinds of companies. They adduce to the acronym HEAD, H-E-A-D. No company is pure H, pure E, pure A, or pure D. If you draw a circle, you got proportions of H-E-A-D adding up to 100%. There are dominantly H companies, heroic companies. Jamshedji Tata saying, I am going to put hydroelectric power station in Bhivpuri in 1870 is as crazy as somebody saying, I'm going to make AI change people's worlds tomorrow, $500 billion on the table. That's a heroic company. And remember, in the time Jamshedji Tata did this, those Indians were allowed to sit in front of a British officer. There are some IAS types here, so I'm just saying this for their benefit. They were given Kursi Nishin. Kursi Nishin is a pass that allows you to sit in front of the English officer. All other Indians had to stand. That was the mahol, the environment in which Jamshedji taught us this. It's very heroic. E stands for excellence companies. G in its day, Honeywell, I would say Tata Steel, Tata Motors, they're excellence companies. A stands for altruistic. I'm doing this company for somebody else. I'm merely the conduit. Remember Vivekananda. And D stands for discovery. Elon Musk, Donald Trump, if it's not impolite to mention, do crazy things. Private sector, I'm going to go to the moon. In some ways, I think people like Vikram Sarabhai and Homi Bhabha were of the D variety. In some ways, Vishwesharaya, I'm taking people from the wider public space, or Acharya Jagdish Chandra Bose were in the H space. But most of us are dominated by E and some few by A. And you have to discover what kind of a company you are. It's like Atma Bodhan. This is another Eastern idea, that is Atma Bodhan. And if an excellence company tries to become a discovery company, or the other way, then the mutation is rather difficult. Anyway, we will, if you agree, we'll throw it open for a discussion, not necessarily for questions, but if you have questions, that's also fine. Sir, will you pass a mic around?
Thanks for the interesting deliberation. I presume that the future of educational institutions, they do not depend upon degrees or titles. I think there has to be some kind of a planned disruption where the institution should focus on making the students to become more adaptable, learn and relearn, and also apply things. Some pointers could be like, instead of calling all them as classrooms, probably they should be called as skill rooms. The focus has to change, project-based learning, then more of internships, more of industry collaborations. The planned disruption has to be taken up by the educational institutions, in specific the higher educational institutions. So your thoughts on these, please.
Well, I think what you say is unexceptionable. You know, many of us know, we are like economists. We know what is to be done, but we don't know how to do it. That's the characteristic of I hope there are no economists here, sorry. Is Montek here? I hope not. Okay. That's a bit of an indiscretion. But there are various professions, consultants, academics. I'm sorry for you, my friend. They know what is to be done, but they don't know how to do it. Operation fellows who do dhakkabaji figure out by trying various things. So you need a combination of both. That the institutions, that curiosity. There's a beautiful video, YouTube video, which has been put forward by this young Chennai-based boy who's had a startup there. And it's circulating on video. Some of you might have seen it. I forget his name. AI has the potential to arouse curiosity. But before AI, which is the last thousands of years, academic institutions and parents had to arouse curiosity of children. So what you say is unexceptionable. I have no words. I'm not sure how I would do it because I'm not an academic, but perhaps you're better equipped to do it.
This is a question to both of you because you mentioned about Japan.
Please close it.
Yeah, you mentioned about Japan. Japan is actually failing right now. It's not just about the dwindling youth over there, but also with the fact that people who are kind of getting into the remaining youth who's kind of getting back into the system is actually going back to the Atma. They're not really sticking to the Atma that was there and they want to change. So how adaptive should you be when it comes to kind of taking this, the soul or the culture or whatever it is, because for years and years and years it has to withstand. And how is it in today's day and age that you should actually kind of work around it?
Well, we can always criticize any good example and say there is a problem. I think the more important question is the last part of your question, which is, do we honor the living? Do we think about it? Do we understand its characteristics? Do we understand that it has nonlinear properties? Do we understand that it has systemic patterns? Do we understand that mindset and thoughts are the origin of the living? These are the more deeper aspects that one has to dwell upon. But in the world of management, most of the time, as we talked about, it's machine, 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 and machine. So I think for any sustainable discussion, the living has to be in its rightful position and the machine subservient to the living, not the way we have constructed the world today, where the machine dictates to the living what needs to happen, quarterly numbers need to come, this numbers need to happen, all those things. So I think various countries for a period of time have shown that as an example. So Japan showed that as an example for more than 30, 40 years. It wouldn't be such a bad idea to go and study it because a lot of the philosophical tenets of Japanese companies directly taken from Indian philosophy. I do not know whether you're aware, the ancient name of India in Japan is, in Japanese, is center of heaven. Obviously, they put India on a certain pedestal when they looked at India. So a little bit of what he was saying, the Eastern approach, the humanistic approach, the approach which puts the living as a sacred element, it needs to come back and it needs to find its rightful position. And maybe India can do something in this regard.
Can I add a little bit to that? This point about Eastern approach, I want to keep emphasizing that it's not an exceptionalism. I'm not saying we are better than other people, but since the subject has come up. I see the journey of a company like a river. Right? Use your imagination. Where does Kaveri start? Talakaveri. Where does it end? Nagapatnam. It flows as a small trickle, or Ganga for that matter. You can take whichever metaphor you want. It starts as a small trickle, unimpressive, and looking quite incapable of becoming whatever it finally becomes. That is the purpose of the company. What do you really want to do with your company? It is true for your personal life as well, but let's leave that aside. It is true for every religion. When Muhammad came and said what he said, or when Jesus said what he said, or when Adi Shankara said what he said, it was a small trickle, it was simple. Now what happens to that river, that water? It starts, it floats, it picks up new ideas as it goes along, tributaries. It follows the hydrology that it can best traverse. He doesn't try to become a unicorn. I must become a Niagara within 10 kilometers. That's unnatural. It follows its own hydrology, and then flows into and I tell my Punjabi friends, you think Punjab is 5 rivers, only Punjab has it? I come from Tiruvallur, which has 5 rivers. That's what Tiruvallur means. It means 5 rivers. So we have a delta in Bengal, we have a delta near Karachi, we have a delta near Tanjore. But what is the river doing? It is nourishing civilizations as it goes. It's got an original purpose, but it is nourishing civilizations. So you can say this is where Krishna was, this is where Ram Ayodhya was, this is where this emperor had a civilization. It is generating icons. So you say, this is the famous place where Shankaracharya put his right foot, this is the place where something else happened, and you cause that to be celebrated. And then it produces rituals. Then what we do when we produce our kids, we start with the rituals. You must wear it horizontally, vertically, or don't wear either. Put red, blue, white. Keep shaking your head, shaking your hand. They never go beyond the rituals. They are stuck in the delta. When they want to find their purpose, they have to travel upstream in the river. The river has come downstream. But most of us send our children, our companies, our startups at the bottom end. They try to become 5 trillion in 3 years or whatever. It's like being excessively ritualistic can also have a problem. When you are lost, and that can happen to long-living companies, then you travel upstream. And think of what was the original philosophy. I want to give you one example of this. Just a practical example. Please don't think I'm here to idolize Tata or Levers, because that's my experience. I have no other experience. I can't talk about other people. I was sitting at the table. I was on the board of Hindustan Lever when the Ulfa trouble happened in Assam. We had tea gardens there, Dumduma Tea Estate. And they had already abducted one manager earlier and returned him. That was a warning. And the message came that if you don't pay X crores by Y time, we are going to shoot this guy and his family. I was terrified. I don't mind admitting it. But there were 7 other people who didn't show their terror, so I also didn't show my terror. And we said we must do the right thing. What does Hindustan Lever stand for? We have a commitment to our employee. If you let one general manager go, there will be tomorrow 2 assistant general managers, 3 assistant general managers. We used all our resources in a fair and proper way, went to Rajiv, went to the IB, went to the Chief of Army Staff, and said, we need help. And we need it pronto. Okay, we had a little bit of heft being Hindustan Lever. A private plane was provided, IAF plane, not private. It landed at the middle of the night in Jorhat or wherever, Dumduma. Airlifted all the families, mothers, children, everybody, out to safety. The Chief Minister of Assam at that time found out next morning. When we were caught with a dilemma, and we will all be caught with dilemmas during our lives when we run our companies. What is the right thing to do? You say, what is this company all about? You went upstream to the Gangotri and said, this is about fairness to employees. If you don't stand up for them now, giving 10 more speeches and giving 20-year awards later is not going to help. It's a small example. When the terror attack happened in the Taj, nobody has been experienced in that. There's no case study on this. Nowadays there's a case study, but not then. Ratan Tata went. I had an appointment with him on 27th of November. Of course, that's before we knew there's a terror attack. 10:30. I got up in the morning after a bad night, and he must have had a worse night. I said, 10:30, who's going to come to office now? But I have said 10:30, he's my boss, I must go. If he's not there, I'll come back. I went. The guy was sitting there. have a cup of coffee. So I said, Ratan, why are you here? After the terrible night you must have had. He said, because I made an appointment with you. See, this is the thing. This is not a eulogy for Ratan Tata. It's a eulogy for what do you stand for? Who are you? And then we both agreed we'll finish our cup of coffee and not have our whatever was the matter for discussion. And we closed it. And then a few weeks later, the head of HR in Tata Taj took him around to the place, the hospital where people were wounded, and we had lost many lives. And he wanted to show that he has done everything possible. He wanted to show that he had been efficient. And he said, sir, this family we have done this, in that family we have done that. We have finished all the 35. Like a good HR guy, like any good employee, not HR guy. He said, sir, is everything okay? Have I done everything? Anything else left to be done for these people? And Ratan Tata's reply to him was, I have not come here to find out whether you've done everything right. I have come here to find out what more can Tatas do. And then the idea came that we will set up a trust. And the trust would serve all the people injured, not those who came only to Taj. So I'm giving these as examples to say, when you're in a dilemma, when you're confused, you don't know what to do, you go back to your origin, go upstream. I hope that helps.
Incidentally, one of those 1,000-year-old companies in Japan makes the finest sake still.
Sake.
Adding to the philosophical discussion here, when speaking about longevity and long-lasting enterprises, I would want to quote two examples from nature, two long-lasting species, a banyan tree and a banana tree. If you observe how a banyan tree functions and a banana tree functions, they both operate differently. A banyan tree has a large footprint. It monopolizes the market. It captures all sunlight and it does not allow anything to grow under it. When we say Ayushman Bhava, we also say Valayadi Valayaga Valanduva. It's a wish in Tamil. A banana tree operates differently. It takes a very small footprint. When a senior member of that plant dies, under its roots a junior member grows. It happens repeatedly. So they both live for a long period. Compare this with businesses also. So when there are very few large companies dominating a market, nothing grows under them. Unless and until if the large company decides to allow a gap intentionally and a startup is smart enough to identify the gap and grow from there. So we need more banana trees than banyan trees. This is exactly what you said when you quoted the numbers. 19,000 companies have 10 crore capital. So if we have large number of smaller companies which can live a long life, there could be diversity in the market. That can support the ecosystem. So instead of having or celebrating very, see, if you look at the nature, there are very few number of banyan trees. We don't see banyan trees everywhere. So they are very scattered. Some places we see them and many places we don't see them. We need the same in the business ecosystem also.
Mahendran, I was joking yesterday that you look like Veerappan. But I think you're truly Shiva's bhakti. What you've said is absolutely what I'm saying. India does not need 500 Tatas. That's a rhetorical way of saying it. We need 5 lakh. I go to Coimbatore, I look at what the Gaunders have done, I see what the Chettiars have done, I see Nalli in Chennai. These are fantastic companies. They will not come in the pink papers, necessarily. One day they may come there also. There are fabulous companies which I call small giants. And these are unknown. There's a company called Galaxy Surfactants. It's a public listed company. And Galaxy Surfactants is doing a marvelous job. No problem. We need 1,000 Galaxy Surfactants. I wrote a book. I wrote to 10 CEOs saying, I want to study your company in a research project with some academic professors to find out how you are practicing long life. You know, it may or may not happen. Like I may go for exercise every morning, but I may not live till 100 or whatever is the target. 6 of them replied, and I've written one book on each. TCS, none of these companies was alive when I started my career. Now don't think I was Aurangzeb's classmate. I know it gives that impression. TCS, HDFC, Kotak, Biocon, Marico, 5, 6 companies. And I put down together a matrix. It appears in each book. A slim book I wrote, because I didn't want to write a Ramchandra Guha type of book, because then, you'll need a weightlifter to accompany you on your flights. So I wrote 6 little books of 150 pages each. And we put a matrix in each one. What is the Brahma Mantra of these companies? And then I validated it with Tata, which is my 7th book. These 7 together are my contribution to Dirga Ayush Bhava. The first item on all of them is people. This point you made about allowing the next one to... I look at... People remember Jamshedji Tata, but people have forgotten Barjorji Pacha. Without Barjorji Pacha, he would not have become what he has become. And other people, I'm not going into the whole thing. People talk of J.R.D. Tata. Yes, he got the Bharat Ratna. But without the Sumant Mulgaonkars of the world, he would not have become what he's become, or the Nani Palkhiwalas. It was my singular honor to sit at the same board table as these people, like a small little, one of the minuscule fellows, big giants. Look at Ratan Tata. Without the Jamshed Iranis and the Naushir Sunawalas, he could not have done what he has done. So I think the point that you make is absolutely super. India needs big giants and small giants, not only big giants. You're quite right.
Right. Thank you.
You have a fine balance of how you looked at Eastern thought and Western formats or systems. As we grow into a world that has been influenced a lot with Western efficiency, effectiveness as an idea and an ideology, sometimes it looks like a philosophy. You seem to have a balance because, one, you have read it, you've understood it, but how does the country go forward by actually understanding far better? Because when we talk about Indian and Indianness, it becomes cultural. When you talk about Western ideas, it becomes professional ideas and possibilities. How does one maintain this balance as we go ahead? Because we are moving more into an era where communication is largely centered in platforms around multiple other things, and I have nothing against, as you kept saying, nothing against Western thought or not sort of stuck to Eastern ideas.
That's a brilliant question. When Shankara got his idea in Kaladi, that this is the way Hinduism is, what did he do with that thought? How does he make other people realize it? Remember, India was a Buddhist country and a Jain country in those days. Hinduism was on the wane. After thinking about it, he did his journey to the 4 places, walked I don't know how many kilometers by foot, and did whatever he had to. Look at how Buddha got this under the tree, Bodhi tree, and then he assembled people by going around and talking about it. And he told people, don't accept what I am saying. Debate it. If you don't agree, that's fine. But if you agree, then join me and become a... So, if that's how the world's greatest ideas came, not by just having one seminar, which is what I'm looking for Living Machine Institute, CII, FICCI, Drucker Forum, because as an individual, it's not my idea, by the way. I don't want to put myself in the place of those great people. I'm saying if there's an idea, then the institutionalization, doing the Padayatra to create, CII can do it, I can't do it. All I can offer is, if at all CII wants, I'm using CII because I'm sitting in CII, if it was FICCI, I would say FICCI. If you want, I'm prepared to travel. Not by foot, but by aeroplane. To talk about it and infect the idea. I think it's a decent bacteria.
That's a great question. I think
Also, because you spoke about Japan and Germany, they both have been able to slightly do it better than us. They've
Exactly.
resisted, but also compounded the best of the West.
absolutely, you said it very well. When I visited Japan, they are currently in that search to refresh themselves because they believe that they allowed many of the Western ideas to get into the business schools. And they're actually now trying to go back to the fundamentals, like what RJ is saying, go back upstream again to Zen and various other ideas. But let me answer your question in a couple of more precise ways. One, what is it that we are doing in India to take the best of our philosophical tenets, contemporize it, and connect with modern problems? In my view, zilch. Okay, so that's one. Second, can we create a language which the Western ideas, the people who currently control and dominate ideas, can we inject it into their atmosphere and their conversations? I think these are the two main things that I would say that India ought to focus on. We need to develop our philosophies and convert it into practical ideas. We have taken 18 years to build a living machine, but it was not a shortcut. It had to be a long journey to get there. And today, I think the Drucker Forum understands the value of this idea and has taken it under the fold of next management. So I don't think there is any paucity of such possibilities. I think we have to look at the world through the lens which you have just said. What are the philosophical tenets which can be contemporarized, contextualized to solve problems from our philosophical perspective, which is practical and sustainable from a Western context? We need to marry the two. It cannot be one or the other, which is an absolute falsity. So it again goes back to what he said. We are not looking for exceptionalism. We are looking for a happy blend, a harmony.
May I add one small point? Because your CII, I feel I'm in the presence of a great Asti, who's got arms, legs, and motive power. And I'm not wrong in my statement because I have been a very active member in my younger days in CII. India has no philosophy of industrialization. We have an industrial policy resolution 1956, 1951. We have many edicts that have come out. But do we have a philosophy? To me, a philosophy is simple. It will not be 500 pages like Ambedkar's constitution. Not like the preamble to the constitution. A philosophy should be short. What should the philosophy touch upon? 3 things only, which Swami Vivekananda has said. So it has an Eastern orientation. When Swami Vivekananda was asked by the American businessman in Chicago, Swamiji, we don't understand all this highfalutin stuff you're saying. Can you tell us in simple ways? We are all businessmen. How can we run our business better? He said, do only 4 things. Swami Vivekananda said. I'm paraphrasing it. It all came through in a more... first, he said, become self-aware. Gangotri, Talakaveri. Why are you doing what you're doing? Point number 1. Point number 2 is, he said, protect your resources. You're able to do business because of air, water, soil, people. Protect it. You can't do business by neglecting them. Ecology, sustainability, you spent 4 hours yesterday. Swamiji said it in 1 sentence. Protect your resources. Third, he said, work for others before you work for yourself. Not only shareholders, stakeholders. And the 4th thing he said is, take your decisions ruthlessly, but implement them with compassion. Now, if we can have an industrial philosophy for India, it is my humble view, I'm making this statement amongst colleagues and peers, not for criticizing anybody, but in 76 years of independence, India has not had a philosophy. We have no Talakaveri for our industrialization. And if you can put in these 4 words, sustainable, humane, enlightened, entrepreneurship is what we want in India, then Kerala can do a course correct, Nilgiris can be protected, because the philosophy becomes, it's like Swachh Bharat. You don't have to give people a 2-month lecture on being clean and hygienic. So my hope is CII can draft something. I'm willing to put my 2 pennies worth. How to create, I call them she enterprises. Sustainable, humane, enlightened. And my wife approves because I give it a feminine touch. So she
Which is
thinks
very
it's a good
important.
idea.
Few things. Gopal, let me start from the last one that you said. I don't believe it did not have a philosophy. Please Google the word Shreni, and you will know what it is, because the first time I heard it, I was shocked. It's a group of merchants, traders, and artisans in ancient India who had guilds and were a significant part of the socio-economic structure: training, raw material, finished products, trade, and banking. Written down.
By the way, I said it after independence.
Okay.
You've gone
I
back.
agree.
I myself admitted, you have to read Ponniyin Selvan or read the Chola Empire, you'll find these principles were all there.
And the next point is that, you see, when you talk about the West and the East, all Abrahamic religions are linear. It's not circular. Whereas, if you take the Inuit Indians, the Mayas, the Incas, us here in the subcontinent and the eastern ones, we all have a circular kind of thing. There's rebirth, including parts of Israel. So this entire thing for thousands of years have trained us to be this way. And unfortunately, maybe after or before independence, we thought what the West said was the best. Now coming to your point of how to embed, you've heard of the concept of browning of America, which took place about 50 years ago. Most professors are today Indian origin at least. These are the best guys to get at and see how they can look at. And a very interesting thing we had a few years ago, where I was on a call with the Japanese, with the Inuit Indian, with the European and American on how impact of our religions on business. Within 3 minutes, the Japanese, the Inuit Indian and I were on the same page. Whereas the European and the American didn't even understand what we were talking about. The circularity of all this. So there is a certain base which we have forgotten, which we need to get back and have a synthesis of this. Let me come to the last point. You have been a great professional. Some of us are professionals. Here is a TVS guy out here. How many of us, at this point, at this age, we talk a lot of philosophical way of, how many of us did that when we were 20s and 30s? We did this when we were at 20s and 30s. We were also linear. So, having got this, we sit on boards of companies. Are we pushing these companies to change the way that we evaluate our people? All our KPIs are driving silos. We have hardly, few companies are doing, but hardly anything. So are we doing this with the board? Are we saying that the purpose of business is beyond just the business of making money? We are not. You sit on a board, what's your sales growth? What's your cash flow? What's your profitability? Hey, what happened to the rest of it? What are your HR policies? How happy are your people? How happy are your customers? The one model that has done this a little bit is the EFQM model of excellence, where it focuses on the external more than the internal. But can we start here, all these businesses, to change the way we evaluate our people and set their incentives or their KPIs? Because if you don't drive it, it'll never happen. We will still be talking the same thing next year. So these are my few points.
You're absolutely right. Sir, you just imagine, if I may break off a bit into Tamil, for those who don't understand Tamil, my apologies. There's a log of wood. It has to be moved. Lot of yerumbu, ants want to undertake the task. So they say, how can they had a conference? It is called the Nilgiri Economic Dialogue. Okay. And they said, how shall we move it? Then they decided we'll all be in a straight line, one behind the other. And there's a bloody elephant there, climb up his trunk, tickle his ear. And the elephant moved the log. Can you be the Yerumbu? And can CI be the Yana? Now, whose ear you want to tickle, you decide.
Um, we are in the age of AI disruption, and it is going to be phenomenally high as compared to the earlier kind of disruptions that we were seeing. And I got a part of the answer that I'm asking for. I'm looking for another part. It's going to be a huge machine which can literally do whatever human beings could have done with information. The only thing missing is going to be the consciousness or life, whichever life that we are talking about. We were saying that machines, we have to have life inbuilt into it. My question originally was, what do we do to infuse life into the machine? And you answered it in so many ways, saying that it's going to be the people who needs to infuse that. As a next step for longevity, is there some process by which startups that are coming up right now can think of infusing this life into the company that they are starting up? Thank you.
Well, you know, the methodology for that is pretty well architectured. I have an idea, I build the idea to this level, then I give it to a bigger guy who's got the resources to take it forward. My Atma will live, my technology. My name may or may not be there. I want to give you one small example. Single examples don't make a larger point, so I don't want to exaggerate. I don't know how many of you are from Bangalore, but 3-4 of you. There was a company, I use the word was because the physical body of the company, I think it was called, it will come back to my mind. The company doesn't exist in its physical form, but its Atma exists. It's by an unknown person, and he was a professional electrical engineer working in the KSEDC or whatever, distribution company. And he got this idea that why can't I make monitoring of electricity consumption, electronic, and certain ideas he had. He set it up, but he was not a great businessman. His daughter-in-law she became his daughter-in-law, was an IIM graduate. And she came in and she set up. They got to not only break even, they made money, they were profitable, and a French company came and they said, this is fantastic. You ought to, they said, we don't have the money. We'll buy you for X. She says, keep my Atma. They still call it by that name. That is a division of Schneider. Sorry? I know who you're talking. What is the name? My memory is. Sorry? Enercon. That's the name. Now look at Enercon. I know a little bit about it because my former boss became the chairman. She had all professional board directors. All professionals. And they, not experts in electricity, one or two were. She said, right from the beginning, I'm going to teach my child values, my child being the company. I won't start teaching values when the child is 20, which is what many startups do. Baiju says, when the accounts and all, we can sort it out later. Abhi ke liye, hurry up and get the valuation up. So if you train the child well, the child will come to a certain age. And just like if my son becomes a top-class potential cricketer, I said, now you take him to the academy. And then they grill him and do whatever they have to till he becomes India test cricketer. Do the same. When you get wedded to your own idea, as this idea can be matured only by me, and my name will go down into posterity, then you start getting into some difficulty. You don't have to give up too soon. Make your money. Be like Thomas Alva Edison, who made all his money by patents and out. Patent out, patent out, patent out. He was a rich man when he died, but none of them was his own company, other than what became GE later.
Yeah, I have a view to Shankarana's question about Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy. So my idea is, let's not, his point was, it is difficult to talk culture because in a various diverse country, to talk about culture becomes difficult. My point is, let's not talk about culture, but become that culture. So let us use our Eastern or Indian philosophy of health, of inner journey, of spirituality or inner growth through Gita, through Tirukkural. There are so many literatures, so many philosophies available. Let's just become that, and so that somebody will ask you who you are, what is that you're different, what do you do? So instead of talking about culture, let us become that culture, and so that somebody questions us to tell what it is. And let us use the Western data, research, and their accreditation for our businesses to maybe showcase and include more people. So that's the bridge that I found. Use Eastern philosophy and expand your vessel and become that aura that you are, so that you can hold a lot more people in your life.
You know, you make, madam, a brilliant suggestion. Again, if you'll allow me to share an experience, that's exactly what Indian corporates are doing. We are egging them to do more of it. I'll give you an example. Examples help to make the point, and forgive me, my examples are from companies which I know intimately. I joined Tata's in 1998. Around 2000 or thereabouts, we started to think about taking TCS into IPO. And so the whole Tata group came under scrutiny of various agencies. And one American investor said, how can you run a steel company when you're running a whole township? You're not a municipal corporation. Unless you give up all this, we will not think of. So Ratan Tata replied, I'm trying to say it from my memory, I may not be accurate in every word I say. He said, Tatas will do it the way Tatas wish to do it. How to invest is your decision. Which is his polite way of saying that we think this is very important. If you go to our Hosur factory now, which I have not visited yet, but I have been told where the electronics is coming up, I'm told after 120 years, something like that has been replicated, almost a township. So I'm sure when you go to Godrej, you go to Bajaj, you go to TVS, you'll find their personality, their philosophy reflected in their company. And they all don't have to be identical. We are only egging more and more people to believe, because Indian philosophical ideas, we are that. We are not different. We don't have to preach to you. I'm merely trying to have a communication. Please be, you go to what a marvelous job they do in Coimbatore. You don't have to give them a philosophy to go to those Naidus and tell them how to do it. They do it. That's them. So I fully support what you say.
Thank you, sir. And also one more point, that we are interested in the longevity of the company. I think my idea to the longevity of the company would be if we are interested in the longevity of each individual operating there. So longevity in terms of not just the number of years that we have lived, but happiness and contentment of our lives. That also should be mattered.
Very fair point. That's a fair point.
Ladies and gentlemen, a brilliant round of applause for the thought-provoking session.